Welcome to My Turn Life Coaching with me, Rikki Schwartz. If you're like most people, you've spent your entire life focusing on the demands of parenting, of relationships, of your livelihood. Much like you've been riding in a life-powered bobsled, leaning into what others expect of you. But I'm here to help you reclaim your life. I want to embolden you to raise your hand today and every day and say, "It's my turn." I'm Rikki Schwartz, and welcome to It's My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour, and let's see if we can begin to get the seeds of reclaiming your life to take root. And then please join us every second and fourth Wednesday of every month, 12 p.m. Pacific time, where my expert guests and I will do our very best to give you the tools you need to finally say, "It's my turn." Today's return guest is Jeff Nischwitz. He was on our last episode 2 weeks ago at this time. He's the founder of the Nischwitz group dedicated to the transformation of people and organizations, co-founder of Cardivera, a leadership development ecosystem. He's a personal transformation coach. He's the author of 5 books, because he never gets bored apparently, including the one we discussed in our last Transformation Talk Radio episode. That book was called Unmask, Let Go of Who You're Supposed to Be and Unleash Your True Leader. And the one we're going to talk about today, Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. In today's book, Jeff describes in poignant detail how he used his own personal adventure hiking 200 miles down the Camino Trail to discover how he had unintentionally kind of trapped himself into a life rut, and that the only way to escape it was to figuratively and literally walk backwards for the last 7 days of his hike. So Jeff, welcome back to My Turn Life Coaching, and thank you so much for being here again.
Thanks, Rikki. It is always a pleasure to see you and to sit and chat.
Thank you. Me too. So as we did last time, and in an effort to kind of fast track the connection between my guests and my listeners, I like to begin every interview with the same question. What are your personal core values, and in particular, the ones that align with our interview today?
Well, they all align, hopefully. That's my mission every day, is to have them align. And so there are 5. They are authenticity, which is, for me, that means being willing to be me and have just that be enough. So authenticity, vulnerability, which is my willing to allow you and everyone else to experience that real me. Accountability, in the sense of being a person who honors my word. The other is a big one for me, is unconditional love. And unconditional love is working every day to minimize and at least catch and take back my judgments of others, and to accept them as they are, and to, in that way, create a safe space. And so the other for me is about integrity. And integrity for me it is about honesty at a basic level, but it's really about alignment. And so it ties all the 5 together, that if I say I want to be authentic, but I don't engage with you in an authentic way, then I'm out of alignment, which means I'm out of integrity. Part of that is also my belief systems and what I say I believe in that, and this is a big one for me, could be a whole topic, but that so often I see people that will say, and the political realm is a perfect example, right? When the deck is stacked in my favor, this is what I believe. But when the issue goes the other way, I have a different belief system. To me, that's an out of integrity piece, because if you believe something to be true, it's true no matter who's in the seat. It doesn't matter if it's you or someone else. And that's a hard one. And I see it a lot, and it's something I work hard on myself. So those are the big 5.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's get started talking about your book. First of all, it's an unusual book title, and it begs a lot of questions right off the bat. I know it did for me before I read it. So tell our listeners something about the Camino Trail itself. Most people have no idea where or what it is, what it's like, what it looks like, what it feels like, what drew you there, and why did you choose to hike 200 miles down any trail? And finally, when did you know you were going to write a book about it?
Well, that last one is the most poignant part, but I'll save that for last. But
Okay.
I will start at the end about the mileage. So the humorous answer, but the true answer is why I decided to walk 200 miles. That's what it ended up being, is that I didn't have enough time available that month to walk the whole 500 miles. And actually, to do the whole thing, this is called the Camino Frances, the northern Spain route. Uh, to walk the whole thing and walk to the two ocean cities, which I did, would be about 570 miles. And so the short answer is I would love to do the whole thing. I only had a couple of weeks and I wanted to go, so I went. So I walked 200 miles because I didn't have the time available right then to do 570.
Okay, that's not the answer I was expecting, and I'm a little bit angry at it, but go ahead.
Well, that's cool. I will say this, though. Part of how I created that was I looked at the city where you finish officially, and then you go in the record book, which is Santiago de Compostela. And then I looked at how many days I had, and I started pushing myself up the trail, saying, if I do 20 miles a day, where do I need to start? Because you have to figure out where you start. So there's some math to it.
I
And
see.
I did the best estimate to say I will be there 11 days in northern Spain. I was in Spain 2 weeks, but I've got 11 days, and I figured somewhere in there I'd take a day off. So I said, all right, where can I start? And I will tell you, I kept pushing myself. But I will tell you this, Rikki, I was not intimidated until about a month before I left because I was talking to my friend Mark LeBlanc, who's a mentor and friend on this journey. He was there the same time I was. That's a whole nother magical synchronicity story, or two of them. And Mark was telling me that he's walking 500 miles. He's done the whole thing now 3 times. And I said, I wonder how far that is. And at the time, I lived in Cleveland, Ohio. So I said, what's 500 miles from Cleveland? I said, oh my God, that's Charlotte, North Carolina. Mark is walking from Cleveland to Charlotte, which blew my mind. And then I said, well, how far am I walking? So I got the map out, and my
That was a
hometown is
mistake.
Dayton, Ohio. And I said, Dayton to Cleveland's 205 miles. I'm walking from Cleveland to Dayton.
No.
That's when I started to get intimidated.
You think?
That was the moment.
Okay. So tell me about the Camino Trail. What's it look like? What's it feel like? What made it so magical?
Well, it is incredibly beautiful. I mean, pretty much everything you want to see. You're not going to see big, huge cities. You do go walk through a couple of maybe 100,000 population city, but it's a lot of small villages, buildings that are clearly 600 years old, farmland, mountains. You're going to walk roads. You're going to walk uh, dirt roads. You're going to walk rocky roads. You're going to do flat ground, going uphill, downhill, just gorgeous sights. And you not only, and the people you experience and the food. Now, I will tell you how I got there was synchronicity. It was, and this is a funny story. In 2015, I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, working all week. I had driven there, so I had the opportunity on Saturday morning to sleep in. I was so thrilled because I was exhausted. I said, "This is going to be awesome. I get to sleep in." I didn't have to be anywhere, and I wake up at 3 a.m.
Of
Oh
course.
my God. I wake up at 3 a.m. I'm resistant. I don't give up. And finally sit up at 6:03. Don't ask why I remember it.
I
And at
know.
6:03, I turn on the TV. I don't hit any channels. I just hit what's on. There's a movie coming on. It turns out it's the movie called The Way, which is Martin Sheen, and it's about the Camino. And by the time I had started bawling the third time, I just said, I have to do this. It's clear I've been called to this. And that began the magic, the journey of getting there and the friends I met and the mentorship and all these things that just lined up. In fact, one of the most amazing early stories was this was on a Saturday. And on Monday or Tuesday, I put on Facebook the story of what had happened, that I woke up in the hotel, I couldn't sleep, turned on the movie, and I said in this Facebook post, I'm doing the Camino. I didn't say when, I'm doing it. 2 years later, I had decided to go, but I hadn't told anyone.
Oh, and
And
that's
I woke up on a Monday morning and in bed, and I said, you know what? I'm going to put it on Facebook today. And I went to Facebook to post that I'm going to the Camino in about 6 weeks. And you know how memories come up? The memory that came
two
up
years
was that
earlier.
exact day.
No way.
Yes way. And I went, oh my God. So I just shared the memory, threw that in there that I'm going. And I mean, the book has probably 15 or 20 synchronicities like that led up to the whole trip.
We've got a little less than a minute before our first break. Tell me, because I think our listeners are going to ask themselves, were you already a long distance hiker?
No,
Oh,
no,
no.
I was in pretty good shape back then. I mean, I ran pretty regularly, but I wasn't a crazy runner. I would run like 3 miles. I was in pretty good shape. Never done a lot of hiking. In fact, I'll go through the list real quick. I was dating a woman at the time, and right before I left, she went down this list of have you ever been to Europe? Yes. Have you ever camped or just sort of walked that far? No. Do you speak Spanish? No. Have you ever done a long hike? No. Have you ever just not know where you're going to stay? No. She asked like 10 questions. They were all no. She said, aren't you freaked out? And I said, oh no, I'm just thrilled to be going.
No,
So
you're insane.
everything about it was new, but it felt like it wasn't new.
Gotcha. Let's
There was
put a pin in
something
that
that
for a
grounded
second,
it.
Jeff, because we want to hit our first break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the roots and nuts and bolts of the book. Thanks, Jeff. And we're back. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. My guest today is 5-time author and transformation expert, Jeff Nischwitz. And today we're talking about one of his books called Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. Before we jump back in, I want to remind any of our Facebook Live guests that we welcome any questions or comments you have. Just pop them into the comments field, or you can call the studio while we're airing to speak with myself or Jeff at 800-930-2819. 800-930-2819. Also, I want to make sure that everyone knows how to contact Jeff once this interview is over. Jeff, please give the listeners your contact information.
That's easy. Just spell my last name right. Nischwitz. Email is jeff@nishwitzgroup.com. The website's nishwitzgroup.com. You go there, social media me, you'll find me everywhere.
Perfect. Again, Nischwitz. Thanks, Jeff. All right, let's dive into your book. My last question before we went to break was, when did you decide to write the book?
It was on Mother's Day of 2018. My mother had passed away that January, about 4 or 5 months earlier. And my mother and I had an interesting road in life, but at the end we were great. And she was so supportive of my travels, even though I know she always worried about me. And I had gone to the Camino the year before, super supported, loved telling everybody the story. When she passed, everybody at the nursing home was like, are you the one that went on the walk? So it was a deep connection. And I'm sitting in church on Mother's Day, and obviously very emotional for me, the first Mother's Day. And I was frustrated with myself because I realized I hadn't made a commitment on the book. I kept thinking about it. I wasn't sure. I think I was afraid. I think the things I knew I was going to share, there's some fear about who's going to buy it, who's going to say, who's this guy that thinks he knows something. So in church, I didn't say, I just sort of said this prayer of like the question, should I write this book or not? And I'm not kidding you, Rikki. In that moment, the almost word for word, the dedication came to me to my mom. Almost word for word. In fact, what you read in the book is almost word for word what I heard sitting in church. I started crying and I said, oh, I guess that's a yes. It wasn't a yes, no, it was, but here's the dedication.
Amen.
To mom. So that's how it happened.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. All right, let's dive into the book. My impression as I was reading it, and there's lots of sub sections, if you will, but if I had to break it into 3 major sections, I would have said 1 is just stop and slow down. The second is just walk backwards. And the third is just be present. And I think we agreed that that's what we were going to talk about today. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, in the second segment of the show, let's talk about the first lesson. How did you learn it? What does it mean? How does it translate when you say just stop and slow down?
Well, I get to share, I'm going to share it briefly as I can. It's a longer story, how this moment got set up. So, my friend Mark LeBlanc was on the Camino the same time as me. He was there for a whole month. We had not planned to get together, but we hoped to get together. I didn't think I was going to see him, but fast forward, I get to town late. As far as I knew, he was a mile outside of town. That's what he put on Facebook. And this is a town of 100,000 people. So there's a lot of places to stay. I went to two or three places. There was no room. I said, I'll spend extra money. I found this tiny hotel. Turns out it's 12 rooms. That's how tiny. And I walked in exhausted. All I wanted was to lay down and take a shower. And as I'm giving the clerk, or maybe the owner, the information, I look up and
No,
I thought it was a mirage. It was Mark.
no way.
And I actually said, oh, I repeated his name a couple times. It was like, Mark? Mark? And then it was Mark. Oh my God. And I gave him a hug. He hugged me back. What are you doing here? He said, I'm staying in the hotel. I said, no, you're a mile out. He had changed his
Oh
plans.
my
I
gosh.
had randomly walked into this hotel and he said, it turns out there's 12 rooms. And he said, Jeff, the only reason I'm leaving right now that I saw you is my phone's not working. I'm trying to find a phone store. So he had never got my text saying I'll be in town. The gods, however you want to look at it, put us together. And I said, well, I guess we're having dinner. And he said, oh, yeah, we're having dinner. So we had a beautiful dinner together in Santiago, told our stories of the journey. And I was really hurting. Both of us were. I had some real issues with my feet over the first few days. I had shin splints on both legs, and I had this issue with my feet that turns out it's about my feet. When I got back, a doctor said, all you needed was this pad. Who knew? So for me, the whole from day 3 to day 11, if you imagine like not a screw, but a bolt, and someone hammered it into the balls of your feet. So my feet were hurting. And I tell people every step from those 7 to 8 days, the pain level was a 4 to an 8. Like if I stepped on a rock badly, I would literally go down to my knees in tears and just sort of pull it together. So I'm hurting. And at night, when I took my boots off and I'm in my sandals, oh, it was bad. It looked like this guy couldn't walk 4 feet.
Mhm.
So Mark had some real feet issues with blisters, his worst trip ever, feet health wise. So we go to dinner limping. We're walking back limping. And Mark says, what are you doing tomorrow? Because Mark was heading home. I said, well, I'm walking to this next town. He looked at me and he said, you can barely walk. I said, it's all right, Mark. This is how I am every night. When I've walked all day and I take my boots off. When I put my boots on, I'm better. He said, well, why don't you take a break, Jeff? Just take a break. And I said, well, no, 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 because I want to get to both cities on the sea. I didn't know if I could make it. And he said, Jeff, if you don't get to, you'll get to one. If you don't, you'll come back. I know you'll come back. I said, no, 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 I'm not going that far. He said, well, how far are you going tomorrow? I said, 15 miles. And this is, I mean, if you saw us, you would say these guys should be in the hospital limping. And this is when he said these words to me, and they were epic. He didn't know how epic they were. He said, do you do this all the time? And when he said it, it was like this click.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, I do this all the time.
Yep.
I push past everything. I don't stop. In fact, I pride myself on not stopping so people can say, oh my God, that guy didn't stop. Look at him. And I
Yep.
said, this is my way to prove myself worthy because I do more than everybody and I don't stop. And
Yes.
I paused and I looked at him and I said, I'm taking tomorrow off.
Look at you.
And
And
that,
obviously that translated into one of the themes of the book, right? It's kind
oh,
of,
it's a huge lesson. It's not just about that moment. It's about my willingness, our willingness to just slow down and ultimately sometimes just stop and how it's tied to our worthiness stories and
yeah.
how I feel and we feel we've got to go, go, go. Because I'll say to clients now who are in the go, go mode, So what might happen if you stopped? You literally stop.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the world would fall apart. Well, tell me how.
Yeah.
And then they realize the world
Yeah.
wouldn't end. But then
Yeah.
I'll say, so what really might happen? And they say, then I'm going to judge myself and others are going to judge me on
Yeah.
just this without any activity. And that terrifies me.
I think that resonates with me, and it did as I was reading the book as well. I think that in some bizarre way, and correct me if you think I'm nuts, I think Facebook is added to that because everybody's posts on Facebook talk about what they've done, what they've accomplished, not just in their lives, but that day. And so we feel like I've done nothing. So I think that I think it adds to that feeling of worthiness is linked to accomplishment
I
and that we
think
never
social
let
media
ourselves
does
relax.
do that. I think social media does do it. That's why I try and counter it. Because if you look at my social media and especially Facebook, which has business people on it, I'm more likely to post something like me sitting by the pool and saying, "I'm this is what I'm doing today," or when I'm traveling work-wise, I'll just show myself sitting by the water saying,
Yep.
"This is what I'm doing today," because I want to remind people. Sometimes you do nothing. We all need to do nothing sometimes.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yes.
Just stop. Just stop. And it's hard. It's more challenging than we think.
I have a girlfriend that used to do this when she lived in Michigan, but obviously much less commonly because it involves a hammock and sunshine. But every day in the summer, pretty much every day, she would just post her hammock report. And it was just a picture of her feet and the hammock. And every day she'd post it. And now she's moved to San Francisco. She does the same thing, her feet and the hammock. And I will tell you that looking at those pictures always gave me a little pause to say, have I done my hammock thing today? So I think we all need the hammock picture.
Well, but I think there's a confusing part here too, Ricky, because I think people make up their own stories. And so I think a lot of people, and they've said it to me, they believe that I can stop or slow down because everything's so great. Like you only slow down when you have all the money you want and all that.
Yes.
And so what I tell them is, no, I had a crappy week in terms of business, or like pandemic year was not great for me, but
Yeah,
I still took the time no matter what the situation. And that's the key, the
that's good.
willingness to take that time and just pause and stop. And, how long have we heard the saying, take time to smell the roses? We
Yes,
joke at that, but it's so real.
it is. It really is. And I think time that also brings in the gratefulness that comes with that. It's a time to, if you want to call it meditating, goodness knows I need to do more of that. Thank you for reminding us all about that. We're almost ready for a break. We're going to take our second break, and you're listening to My Life. No, you're not. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Jeff's major second major lesson from the book, Just Walk Backwards. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. We are back. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. And I have with us Jeff Nischwitz talking about his book, Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. Okay, Jeff, we already talked about the first life lesson that you share in your book, namely stop and slow down. And I think you made some amazing points about giving ourselves the right to do that, even if we haven't accomplished everything we need to accomplish in our lives or in the day. So I really like that. In the third segment of the show, I want to talk about the second life lesson you share in the book, which is probably the strangest one in a way, at least in a literal sense, just walk backwards.
It is. And you mentioned in the opening segment about how funky the title is. That title changed about a month before it was published because originally it was Just One Step. That was very clear. It was always the title. But I think I called it The Journey to Your Unstoppable You.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with a book publisher saying, I get it, but there's a lot of people that use that word, and I think it loses the spirit of the Camino. So how it came up is she said, well, my favorite part of the book is about walking backwards.
Is,
What's yours? I said, my favorite part, most important part is the present thing, being in the present. And I said, oh, you know what? There's a line in the book that says I realized as I was writing it that the journey to being more present is actually not a journey forward, but a journey back in time, backward. And so we went, oh, walking backwards to the present on
Yeah,
the Camino Trail. So that's what the title means.
that's pretty cool.
And so, yes, you're right. The walking backwards is a metaphor or whatever the right word is for that, and it's literal. As I mentioned in the early segment, I had real issues with my feet and ankles, and it was bad. I mean, I never considered quitting, and people wonder why, and that's a whole nother discussion, but I didn't. But it was legit pain. And the most pain I experienced was walking downhill. Because if you know much about hiking, that when you walk uphill, it puts strain on certain muscles and on your lungs and your heart. But going downhill puts a lot of stress on your feet, shins, ankles, hips, all the thing that were hurting. So I thought I'd tried everything. I walked slower, I walked faster, sometimes I ran, not always a great plan. Then I saw some people doing this zigzag where you walk at an angle and it takes some of the pressure off, but it wasn't enough. I'm still hurting. And I would look at a hill and I would say, I'm going up. Well, I'm not worried about going up, but if I go up, I have to go down. So I said, well, my feet hurt, so I got to try something radical. So I started walking backwards. And I don't know if I can fully visualize it for everyone, but it's important. I want to be real. This is clear. I was literally walking backwards. I was not walking looking over my shoulder. It was not sideways. It was, if the road went south, if that was the way you was walking, I turned and faced north and walked backwards at a normal rate of speed.
And you
Sometimes
didn't
with
run
my
off the
hiking
road or
poles,
bump into things
I
or
never fell once, never. I had a little system where in my head I would count to 100 and then glance over my shoulder just to see if anything changed or if I was running into someone, because it was usually not that crowded. Or is there a hole or is there a stream running through the path? And I told people while I was walking that I was doing this, when I had dinner, and they went, oh my God, I could never do that. I certainly would fall. I'd lose my balance. I said, I never lost my balance. I never fell. So there's sub lessons in there about trusting ourselves
Mhm.
and taking risk and trusting it'll be okay. So I literally, my guess is from those 7 or 8 days, 70% of the time when I went down a hill, I walked backwards. The only times I didn't was if it was a really extreme, like let's say I was walking in a bed, which happens with boulders. I just couldn't do it. And it made a big difference. Like, what was funny is I saw other people trying it. They kept doing it because they realized it feels better. It's dramatically less stressful on your joints.
So a physiology lesson for those who weren't a physical therapist, as I was in my past life. There's two kinds of muscle motion: concentric, which means like climbing upstairs. You need your thigh muscles to contract. That's concentric. That's the kind we're used to. Pull-ups, push-ups, all concentric. Eccentric is what you discover on your way downstairs, on your way downhill. And that's where the muscles have to contract to keep you from losing stability. Takes way more energy, way more strength. So what you discovered was the eccentric, like most people discover, is a heck of a lot harder than the concentric. And you turned around and made it concentric. So without knowing, you took advantage of your physiology.
That makes sense. I didn't know any of the words or concepts, but that's exactly what it felt like. I completely reversed the experience.
Exactly. So from a metaphorical position, how does that translate in the book?
What I realized was, as I thought about it, and I started journaling about it while I was there, that what would it look like to walk backwards in our life, and how often we're trying to solve problems with tweaks. But what we really need is to fundamentally look at it and act completely different. Now, notice the title of the book, Just One Step. It doesn't mean we don't change that. Everything happens in just one step, but we can radicalize the direction of our steps, which means our thinking and our ideas. And many people have said, Rikki, what the hell does that mean, though? And, I hear you, Jeff, but what does it mean? And I got a chance to model it about 3 days after I got back. When I share this in the book, one of my best friends called me. I hadn't seen him since I got back, and he said, hey, I really need to talk. Are you free tonight? I said, yep, clear the deck. I could tell it was important. We got together. We do what we normally do, which means cocktails and cigars. And I finally said, so what's going on? And he said, well, I knew he was having issues in his marriage. I'd known that for a while, months, maybe a year. He said, I'm really bothered by some things. I'm heading out of town for a funeral in a couple of days. I don't want to leave without talking to my wife about it, but our last number of conversations have not gone well. And he explained what was going on, and I listened for a while. And finally, I said, maybe you need to walk backwards. So I told him the story, and he said, okay, but what does that mean here? And I said, well, you want to go home and tell your wife how you feel. Yep. And that's really valid because your feelings are valid and they need to be heard, but that hasn't worked so well. So what if instead you went home and asked her how she's feeling? And he said, well, Jeff, that's crazy because I'm the one having the feelings. I said, I know. That's why it's walking backwards. But we know that's not working. It's kind of the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So he said, I'll try it. And he called me the next day and I said, well, how'd it go? And he said, unbelievable. He said, we had this a really good conversation. At the end, she said to me, um, thank you for this. This is the most heard that I have felt in 6 months. And I said, did you get to share? He goes, no, but it's okay because I feel like when I get back, I'm not upset anymore. I've calmed down. Just hearing her allowed me to calm down.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when I come back, I can share with
Mm-hmm.
her. And that was radical. That was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean in life? It means channeling George Costanza from Seinfeld, because there's an episode in Seinfeld where George does the opposite. And that's the joke, but I'm offering that it's actually real. Like in the scene, he says he's not going to talk to this woman, and they say, well, why don't you do the opposite? And he goes, yeah, I'll do that. And he goes up and says, hi, I'm George. I'm unemployed and I live with my parents. And she goes, well, hi. And they start dating. And so he's doing all opposites. And we laugh at that. But I'm here to offer that it's really relevant and it can change everything, because whether it's in a relationship, think about the issues at work we have. How often we just try and do it a little different. But what if we did the exact opposite? And here's a simple one that I love to share because I'm a question guy. Most of us are skilled at and most comfortable making statements. Asking questions is walking backwards. It's the exact opposite. So, see, that doesn't sound crazy, does it? But it's an opposite. So, you look at whatever the behavior is or the strategy, you say, what if we did the opposite?
That's great. I think that reminds me of what we teach in one of our courses at Center for Agile Leadership. Even if you were asking the questions, even if you decided to do the opposite, a lot of us still ask questions so that while the person's talking, they're deciding what they're going to say about that even before they finish. So it really takes practice to not only ask questions, but then don't worry about what you want to say. Just listen to the answers.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I had never heard of this before, and I forget the name. I think the book is called The Promise. And I was on a podcast a month or so ago with a guy named Jonathan Bowman Perks, wonderful gentleman. It's called Inspiring Leadership. He's been on our podcast, but he told me about this book, and the promise is I will say nothing.
Wow.
And I did a session with him, and we're going to trade sessions in a month or so, where basically he said, just start talking. I will not interrupt you until you say you're done.
Yeah.
Completely, and I might prod you, but I'm not going to say anything until you're complete. And I talked for 40 minutes
Ha!
about some issues going on in my business and my life. And then I said, yeah, that. And he goes, okay, are you open? It was an amazing experience to have someone just listen to me and never try and figure things out, tell me what to think.
You know what else that reminds me of, Jeff?
Crazy, amazing.
Wonderful. That also makes me think of when you're talking about doing the opposite of what you've been doing, not just making a small change, doing the opposite. Whether you're a fan of Dr. Phil now or in the past, I probably was a little bit more in the past than I am now. He always used to ask the guests who were so certain they were doing things how they should be doing them. And he'd say, how's that working for you? And everybody would laugh because clearly it was not. So we're going to take a break. Our last break. Before we do, Maybe when we come back, let's give your contact information when we come back. Guys, you're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. When we come back, we're going to talk about the third big lesson from Jeff's 200-mile hike in his book, Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. And that is just be present. See you in a couple. Welcome back. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. I have Jeff Nischwitz here talking about his book, Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. Before we start with this fourth segment, Jeff, remind everybody your contact information, please.
Yeah, all you got to do is be able to spell my last name, which is Nischwitz. The website's nishwitzgroup.com. My email is Jeff, Jeff, at nishwitzgroup.com, and all over social media under that name. Find me. Stalk me if you like. Jump into the conversation.
Thank you. So we've already covered 2 life lessons that you shared in your book with regard to your 200-mile hike on the Camino Trail. We talked about stopping and slowing down. We talked about walking backwards. In this last segment of the show, and you've only got about 6 minutes, I'd love to close out with your third major life lesson from your Camino Trail hike, and that is just be present. Go.
Yeah, that's why it's in the title, Walking Backwards to the Present. I have discovered in the word I put on it that when I am in the present and living in the present, I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means and doesn't, but when I am my most powerful. And the word I like to use is my most unstoppable. And it's true for all of us, because when we are actually present, we have no fear, because fear is about what might happen in the future. When we are present, we have no regret. We have no worthiness questions. We don't have, am I enough questions, because they're about what happened in the past and what I believe about that. But in the present, those don't exist, because in the present, all that is what's in front of me, and I am always enough in that. There is no stress in the present, because the stress is about what might happen or not happen in the future. So it is this idyllic state that is achievable. Now, it's not a 24/7 thing. I think, and maybe if you achieve some form of full enlightenment, but the key is more quickly finding the present, and then when you lose it, get back to it.
Yeah.
Now, let me talk for a minute about what it's not. We live in an incredibly distracted world. We talk about our technology, we have our cell phones, but unfortunately, people think that if they remove the distraction, they're present. So they'll say, I put my phone away, now I'm present. Absolutely not true. Because if you are thinking about what's happening on that phone, or what emails are coming on, or what you have to do in a half an hour, or what you got to do tonight, or what's going on in something, a work issue, you're not present. Present means that every element of you, every energy cell of you is just here in this moment. And it seems crazy, but it's really not. And what I love about it is it's not just about interpersonal relationships, but it's a big part. And the reason I'm so committed to being present is I want to be all I'm capable of being. And that only happens when I am present. And what I love about the present moment and being present with you, for example, Rikki, is that when I'm present with you, I give you the most incredible gift that I think exists on the planet. And that is, for that time together, you experience being the most important person on the planet. You're more important than my children in that moment. You're not more important than my children in general, but in that moment you are, because I've blocked everything out. And by the way, that's a bad word. I have taken everything out, committed to being present with you. And when the thoughts come in, I let them go, a lot like meditation.
Yes.
But I'm doing it without a meditation practice in that moment.
Yeah.
And it comes in and it goes. And for me, a big part is the commitment I've made, because I want to be fully present with you, which helps me let them go more easily, to recognize when they come and let them go, and to come up with some strategies to get and stay more present. It's incredible.
But like yoga and like meditation, because they always say when you're meditating, picture a highway and cars going by, and try not to focus on any of the cars. Just let them go by. If anything's interrupting your thought, let it go by. That takes practice, right? I'm terrible at it. So it seems like what you're talking about, essentially the same thing. It's got to take practice, right? You can't be good at it right off the bat.
It takes practice. It takes practice. It takes some tools, but I keep coming back to the word commitment.
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot when I talk about being present because number one, when I'm committed to it, I'm more likely to do it.
Yep.
And I use commitment like words with people. So a great example, it's a way to change our conversation. You come to me to have a conversation and I do what most of us do. I'm trying to multitask.
Yep.
I'm either visibly doing it. I'm on my computer trying to listen to you, or I'm actually doing it. You're talking to me, but I'm thinking about, wait, I got this project to do as soon as this is done. If I'm thinking about that, I'm not present.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I might say to you, and I often say this, Rikki, right now, there's something that is a priority. I need 15 minutes. And here's what I will say. Then I will come find you and I will be fully present for you. I set an intention. I made a promise to you.
That's the commitment part.
Which makes it easier for me to find that space with you because otherwise I lied to you.
Yes.
And I'm out of integrity. So this is where my values come in. For me to be in integrity with you, I have to honor the promise I made to you.
Perfect. So we've got to wrap up, which is killing me. But before we do, I want to remind our listeners that Jeff's giving away 3 copies of his book. You can call the studio to request them at 800-930-2819. Or Jeff, how do they get a copy of your book if they want to purchase one?
Just go to the website, nishwitzgroup.com, look under books. You can order it there and then you'll get a signed copy. I really like signed copies. Yeah.
Yeah, they're nice. I saw you sign mine and it made me feel all glowy inside. So thank you. So again, I want to thank the listeners who took time from their distractions in their busy days and commit to listening to this. It means so much to Jeff and myself. Of course, Jeff, I want to thank you again for sharing lessons learned that we can apply to our lives, even if we're not insane enough to walk 200 miles anywhere. So thank you for that. And if any listeners are interested in finding out more about my life coaching services and how they're designed to help you reclaim your life, go to myturnlifecoaching.com, or you can go to the podcast tab at myturnlifecoaching.com, and all the recordings of the shows I do are found on the podcast tab. Hey, I'd love it if you join me for my next episode too, called Pushing Boundaries, Free Yourself from Yourself, which is going to be Wednesday, April 14th, noon Pacific time. My guest is going to be Mr. Harry Lamberton, Senior Vice President at a multi-billion-dollar waste management company, one that in fact I used to work at. Harry's going to share with us how we push through multiple mental and physical constraints in order to discover untapped interest, skills, talents, and how doing that has led to profound personal and professional purpose and joy. As always, thank you so much, Jacob Kappas. Thank you for making it so easy for myself and my guest, as always. Finally, I'm going to close out this interview, as I will every interview, with one of my favorite quotes or contemplations related to life transformation. Today's food for thought is: stop looking for joy in the same place you lost it. Till next time, be thinking about what you can do to reclaim your life. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into My Turn Life Coaching with me, Rikki Schwartz. Now, before you go, ask yourself this question. At my memorial service, what do I want folks to say was my passion? What do I want them to say was my purpose? If you don't know, or you don't think they'll know, then it's time to say it out loud. It's my turn. Visit myturnlifecoaching.com today and let me help you reclaim your life.